Adobe Digital Editions. Star Trek_Deep Space Nine. A Stitch in Time. Andrew J. Robinson. EPUB window. Focused on book content text. She just looked at me as if saying someone she didn't expect. I could see that I had hurt her. I am sorry. 10 blew back. I won't bother you again. All the brightness, the Aries was now shaded with genuine disappointment, almost sadness. She smiled with her mouth only and walked away. Why? I asked myself. Why? For the life of me I could not understand why it was important to her that I respond. Why should she, so beautiful, so alive, be disappointed if I didn't return her? What did he want from me? Friendship? Why me? I was in turmoil. Her grace and manner, the way she tilted her head and half smiled when she listened, as if everything amused her. It was like a forbidden dream of the unattainable. The attraction was painful because I instinctively knew that while my life would be simpler and more controllable without her, it would also be as drab as my Bamaran uniform. I knew I wasn't going back to the wormhole today. I withdrew my chip, got up, and followed without thinking in the direction she had taken. There were several rows in the area separated by barriers. I was quickly lost, and began to panic that I wouldn't find her. I was now operating on some emotional level that no amount of rational thought could stop. Where was she? I turned a corner and nearly ran her down. I am sorry. My nervous energy and anxiety left me short of breath. I don't mean to be unfriendly. I just don't know why you... I mean, I'm not very... I'm trying my best to get along here and follow the rules and be... And you confuse me. Her head was tilting and her whole face began to form that maddening smile. I am just the Merc. I nearly shouted. She was delighted and began to laugh. Are you making fun of me? It was at that moment, when I asked the question, that I realized just how afraid I was of being the object of her ridicule. She stopped laughing and for the first time she was speechless. Something behind me, however, caught her attention and her expression instantly changed. No. You're not supposed to be here, Merc. You're obviously lost. Follow me. The change was stunning. She brushed by me, and I indeed followed. Then I saw the reason for her change. Approaching us was a third-level intern. At this last level you were no longer called a student. Good day to you, sir. She bowed her head slightly as he stopped in front of us. He nodded to her and looked at me. Who's this? He asked as if I was a specimen. A Merc who's lost, sir. Her personality was totally submerged. Your permission chip, the intern demanded. I held it out to him, but he never took his eyes off mine. I began to sweat. Who's your docent? Elon. Sir. This is not the technical section. Why are you here? His eyes were tightly locked into mine. There was no wobble room with this intern. He knew his business. I thought I was going out the way I came in. I'm sorry, sir. Sorry for what? He asked. For my loss of direction. Yes, he agreed. You need more work in the wilderness. Who's your superior? One Targle, sir. If he ever finds out that the wilderness is the one place I don't need work. He turned to Paladine. One Carrie E. Sir. She responded with vigor. I was not as familiar with the female levels, but Carrie E. struck me as familiar. See that his section leader is informed of his need for wilderness experience. I will, sir. And make sure he leaves the center now. Book content text. I will, sir. Paladine bowed her head again and motioned me to follow her. He was still looking at me like a specimen, but now one with a bad smell. I followed as we made our way back to the entrance, entered our chips, and left the building. We continued along the walkway that led behind the archival center. I'll take you another time, she said, looking straight ahead. I assumed she was talking about whatever it was she wanted to show me. Yes? Call me Valentine. I hesitated. When I first met you I knew that you could become a good friend. Don't ask me why, that's my business. Unless you're a total idiot you don't go about making friends by ridiculing them. Unless they ask for it, she added with a sidelong glance. Am I clear? Yes. Yes. What? Yes. Valentine. She stopped and pointed to the pathway on the right with a gesture I thought slightly larger than necessary. You go that way, Merc. She winked at me and took the left pathway. I watched her departure until I looked back and saw that the intern was watching us from a window in the center. I turned and headed back to the first level study center, feeling that if I had dared, I could have flown there. K.E. It came to me just at the moment 8 kicked out my right leg, spun me around, and sent me sprawling into the pit sand after a motionless standoff that had lasted well into darkness. 6 had fainted, 3 had fallen asleep twice, and 7's hallucinations had been severe enough for Calyx to intervene. As I rose, spitting grains of sand from my mouth, I was not so much embarrassed by my lapse as I was excited by my realization that K.E. was the elite female level 2 group, and Valentine's designation as one put her on an equal footing with one Sharaban. Do some of your best daydreaming here. Hey, 10. Calyx Riley observed. 8 had the look of someone who'd been given an unexpected gift. This had been a grueling session for everyone, and there was much relief that it was over. But even with my lapse, this was probably my best showing in the pit, considering the advanced stratagem and the quality of my opponent. Nobody outlasted 8. Whatever I had found in the wilderness, he had found in the pit. Even one thought that takes you out of the moment is fatal here. 10. There is no recovery, no second chance. Calyx concluded his critique and walked away. Class was over. There were no beginnings and ends for him, only the continuing. I was always the last one to leave the pit. I told myself it was because I was slower than the others, but the truth was that ever since my first encounter with Palantine here, I secretly hoped to see her again, especially after our last meeting. This time, however, 8 uncharacteristically lagged behind with me. What was even more unusual was that he apparently wanted to talk. You were good today, he said. Thank you. I was genuinely grateful for his approval. Did you see him? He asked. Who? I looked around. One Sharaban was watching our stratagem. He left at the end. Sharaban watching us. How do you know it was him? This made me nervous. The last time we met at the central gate he told me he'd be watching me. It was him. His confidence dispelled all doubt. But why? I asked. I don't know. But I think we should be careful. I nodded in agreement. We stood in silence for an awkward moment. Are you going back to the section? He asked. Book content text. No. I'm going to stay here a while and do some forms, I managed to say. 8 remained for a few more minutes. I had the feeling that he wanted to say something more to me. Suddenly he turned and disappeared behind a barrier. The air was filled with whatever went unsaid. He was as shy as anyone I had ever known. As I waited to see if Palantine would come, I was true to my word and worked the kick-spin forms that 8 had danced through while I stumbled. Just as I decided that she wasn't coming and prepared to leave, I heard approaching steps. I turned in their direction expectantly and found myself face to face with one Sharaban. I immediately tuned into my pit focus, with the altogether different expectation of self-defense. Sharaban saw this and began to laugh. His reaction completely disarmed me. Was this the same person? ? Worry. 10. I left my working stick back in the storeroom. Only his gruff voice revealed it was indeed the same person. Everything else about him had changed. His tall, furry body was relaxed, and his smile seemed genuine. I began to relax as well, and then I reminded myself that as a one designate he was most likely a skilled pit warrior. I maintained my focus. And I only came to watch, not to engage, he said, accurately reading my adjustment. You and your mate put on a fine exhibition. That's a difficult stratagem. Calyx must think highly of you both. 8 said that you were watching us. He noticed and you didn't? He asked with his smile. Nobody is stronger than 8 in the pit, I admitted. Nobody. That's quite a claim. Nobody in our group and probably in the first level, I boasted for 8. Is that because he can beat you? Sharaban exposed my boast. There was truth in his question. Well, I certainly want to speak to him as well. When the right time comes. Please, 10, walk with me. I have a proposal. I stood there, mystified by his offer. His smile widened and he motioned me to follow. Sharaban led the way toward the Bamaran grounds, which were hidden by perimeter barriers. Inside was another world, planted and maintained like the public grounds at home. I could almost see Father's work here, and the reminder stabbed at my carefully defended homesickness. Walkways led through soft ground cover and flowering bushes that reached up and met above our heads. It was my first time inside. First-level students aren't allowed except in the company of upper students, and I was amazed by its softness and serenity, especially in the darkness, punctuated by glowing lamps spaced along the way. It was dramatic relief from the prevailing Bamaran harshness. Sharaban stopped at a bench and invited me to sit. In this setting I couldn't help but relax, but at the same time my mind was trying to work out the meaning of his invitation. Do you know about the competition? Sharaban had read me correctly again. The simulated battle at the end of term, I managed. Simulated in that no one is killed, but it can get rough, he said. And the one coming up will be rougher than most because we have an unusual leadership succession this time. Has anyone spoken to you about this? He asked. No. I waited for Sharaban to explain why anyone would, but his mind was following its own logic. He looked at me as if he were praising an inanimate object for its value. You've impressed a number of people here. My second, who's the strongest hunter in our level, wouldn't believe that you got past him that night. He insists that you didn't abide by the rules, he challenged. I understood that this was another way of asking how I had eluded capture. When I didn't respond, Sharaban laughed with that same disarming grace. I didn't expect you to answer. And you shouldn't. Not yet. This brings you power and opportunity. Like the one I'm about to offer. Just tell me one thing, have you told anyone about your methods? He asked with his easy smile. Book content text. I was about to respond when something told me not to. It was the voice that Calyx had been urging me to listen for. The voice that can be heard only when fear and fantasy are not in control of the moment. When I didn't answer I could see that Sharaban was surprised. This time he didn't laugh, he merely nodded. Yes. You're not a merc anymore, are you? But not answering the question tells me what I need to know. His expression had changed, he had determined my value. Like footsteps and female voices suddenly intruded. I realized in the moment of their interruption how intense this exchange with Sharaban had been. When I widened my focus I was shocked to see Palantine and a friend emerge from the darkness. She never looked at me. They nodded to Sharaban, he nodded back, and they disappeared as a desert wind moved noisily through the foliage. The fleeting incongruity. The whole evening was like a dream. Hard, isn't it, 10? Sharaban broke in. To be treated like you don't exist. Of course she treats everyone like that, not just mercs. He was looking in the direction the two females went as if he still could see them. Was he referring to Palantine? He turned back to me. All business. IVE challenged third-level leadership to a competition earlier than usual, on the grounds that they are inferior. I refer especially to the interns of the Raymaclin group. It's my prerogative as leader of the Sharaban. Bamaran is neither inspired nor unified by their example, and I am urging a succession by trial. It was clear from the ease with which this was stated that Sharaban was politically astute and organized. And ambitious. I felt that I had been allowed to enter an inner sanctum and been made privy to a revolutionary decision. In order to mount a successful challenge, I need the best team I can assemble. Being third levels they have the advantage. Not only does one Raymaclin have the obedience of the most proven interns, but in the competition itself they are simply required to defend their position, and nothing more. As challengers, we have to devise an attacking strategy that will prove the worth of our accusation of inferiority. This is not a simple matter. 10. Sharaban engaged me as if I didn't understand. I don't think any challenging leader has ever asked a first-level student to accept a planning position. And certainly not one with a 10 designation, he added with a tinge of condescension. I am responsible for my work, not for my designation, I hotly reminded him. He had touched a sensitive place, and he knew it. Nevertheless, you're a 10, and until you prove yourself otherwise you'll always remain a 10. And I'm not talking about excelling in class or eluding capture, no matter how brilliantly, or settling for second best in the pit. I'm talking about planning and executing group action that ends in nothing less than total victory, the Cartesian ideal of excellence. This school was built upon ! The air around us rang with a passionate challenge. Sharaban was right. He was offering me an opportunity and I knew it. What do you want me to do? I was trembling as if my body were chilled. More than anything, 10, I want you to banish failure. There's no longer any room for it in your life. Agreed. Sharaban offered his hand. I grabbed it like the drowning man. I'm sure he felt me struggle to control my shaking body. Agreed. I was also thrilled. Other than in combat, this was the first time I had physically come into contact with another student. We stood for a long moment in the bowered and darkened pathway holding each other's hand. Aside from Palantine and 8, this was the only other person I was able to look directly in the eyes. Sharaban broke the contact. I'll communicate with you through 9 Lubac about our planning sessions, he said. I was surprised. Why 9? He is my cousin. Sharaban again read me. 9. I was incredulous. But he's... I caught myself before I finished. He is a true 9, Sharaban replied with a diplomatic smile. But he can carry a message, and in war we have to use every soldier according to his strength. We'd better get back. I'll have you excused from the evening assembly. Book content text. It wasn't until Sharaban mentioned the assembly I had missed that I realized how late it was. We made our way to the entrance, and he parted without a word. Once I was alone I felt like I could breathe again. I began to doubt this agreement. This Sharaban had a powerful presence, but how did I know he was telling me the truth? This could be some kind of test. A trap. After all, this was the person who had me beaten in the storeroom. As I stumbled through the darkness on the edge of the training area I was in a daze. Yes, I wanted to prove that I was not a 10, and Sharaban knew that. What student doesn't want to make his mark? But my doubts only increased. Elim, the voice whispered. I was so wrapped in my competing thoughts that I didn't see Valentine standing at the edge of the pathway. In the darkness she was more like the apparition I first saw. You have the strangest friends. I strained to see her face, but I could hear the amused irony in her voice. It's not every evening we find Barkan Loker strolling with a merc through the grounds. Loker. My father buried the legate. Durat Loker, I said without thinking. Did your father kill him? Valentine joked. But I didn't laugh. The Lokers were a legendary family, and the old man's funeral was the largest I had ever seen. Barkan is the grandson and the shining light of our generation. So what's he doing with you, Elim? There was a grating quality to her irony. I should get back. It's late. I started to leave. It's the competition, isn't it? Valentine's question stopped me. How did you know? Again I wasn't thinking, only reacting. I winced at how my training evaporated in her presence. Elim, it's my business to know. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. I think I know why I'm here. 1 Carrie. There was an energy building up in my stomach that was making me nauseous. I wanted to end this conversation. Valentine looked at me for a long moment with her half-smile, which observed everything and revealed nothing. It's a great privilege to be recruited by Barkan. He's as talented as he is ambitious. He'll most likely get what he wants. He usually does, she added with a tone of familiarity. I don't even know if I'm going to do this competition, I admitted. Really? She was mildly surprised. She moved closer to me. Her face, softened by the darkness, was now visible. Why? She asked tenderly. What are you afraid of? Who said I was afraid? But as soon as she asked the question I knew that I was. Elim, why do you think we have these ridges? She stroked the scalloped cords of cartilage and bone that ran along her neck and down her shoulders with a delicacy that stopped my breath. The energy had turned into molten liquid that was now flowing into my groin. The rest of the world was swallowed by complete darkness and I was back inside the tunnel. Because we do, I replied stupidly. Because we need them. Not to support a weak spine as some aliens assume, but because we're a warrior race and we evolved these ridges as a defense against predators. But if we relied solely on these ridges to protect us in battle, we'd be no better than Klingons. That's why we're here, Elim, to develop our minds. And our hearts. She splayed her long, tapered fingers across her breast. For the second time tonight I was spellbound by another's passion. In very different ways, Sharaban and Palantine held me in their orbit, like powerful suns. To be a great warrior is to be a great strategist, and Barkan is offering an opportunity. Again that word. But here in this tunnel, with the rest of the world cut off, opportunity had a different meaning. I was learning something new about myself, an emerging desire for power, but a power that had less to do with mastery over others than it did with connecting to them. The way I felt a connection to Sharaban, and especially to Valentine. You seem to know Sharaban, I said. I know that he can help you achieve your goals here. The fact that he's expressed interest in you. She smiled and shook her head. Usually he walks around here as if he breathes the air of a higher plane. He said the same thing about you.